Hi, I'll be explaining about our signature long-term mentorship program in this video. So at Videsh, we have been trying to help a lot of students figure out how to perfect their application for grad school application and also how to build their profile. So we have created this long-term mentorship program basically for helping students on that. So I'll briefly explain about it. But before that, let me talk a little bit about our team. So we are Raj Dandekar, Rajat Dandekar and myself, Sridhar Panat. So we all studied at IIT Madras and we graduated, and Raj and I went to do our PhDs at MIT, and Rajat did his PhD at Purdue-IIT. So research has been something that was at the core of what we have been doing right from our undergrad. So we have been extremely deeply passionate about the idea of research. So this we continued even during our journey of PhD. And we have been winning a lot of awards for our research. So this was me a few moments before winning the prestigious Langmuir Award. It's a big deal in the ACS community. This was me receiving the Carl G. Sontheimer Prize for Design at MIT. And Raj and Rajat also have been extremely accomplished researchers in their respective fields. So one of the key aspects of the long-term mentorship program is to help you figure out how to conduct high-impact research and how to communicate it very, very effectively in the form of papers or in the form of conferences, with an end goal of getting admits into some of the good programs all across the world. So that's the end goal. So I'll briefly talk about how the admission process works and what are the key factors that determine your chances of admit. So mainly there are three factors that really determine how much likely you are to get an admit. First one is CGPA, and then storytelling in the application, and the last one is the research profile. I don't mean them they are in a decreasing order or anything, but these are the main three most important factors. CGPA is a big factor. I have seen many times that top universities like MIT and Stanford, Caltech, Berkeley, they all really love department toppers. When I say topper, I mean even somewhere in the top 5 of the class. It's considered to be very good. However, please don't worry if you don't have a high enough GPA. There are many things that you can do to offset your GPA. For example, I have seen many times some of my very good friends at MIT, they actually had less than 8 undergraduate GPA, but they were still able to get an admit for PhD because they had a very good research profile to compensate for their GPA. So generally, you can offset your GPA by building a strong research profile, having a very compelling story in the application, or let's say you are cross applying from for example mechanical engineering to machine learning. Taking advanced online courses can show that you have the ability to navigate coursework. That's also very important, because when a department is also trying to look at your academic prowess when they are trying to admit you. Scoring well in GRE and TOEFL can help you very little, not too much, because they don't have that much weightage, and GRE is not needed anyway for many programs. However, you can score well in those to show your competitive ability. In any case, at this point, for example, if you are a fall 2024 applicant, there is no point in dwelling on your GPA anymore. Whether it is high or whether it is low, it's pretty much fixed. So what you can really focus on, whether your GPA is not so good or whether it's great, in the next remaining several months, is to really focus on the storytelling in the application and in building a strong research profile. So that makes the most sense. So what I mean by storytelling in the application is that generally so far, maybe what you have been doing is studying hard for exam, for getting good grades or ranks, which eventually results in help you reach your goal. However, when you think about grad school application, it's very much like it resembles a sales process, in the sense that you are not just applying for a program, but you are trying to convince the admission committee by telling a very compelling story that they should take you in instead of taking someone else. So generally, if you think about these documents, SOP, which is statement of purpose, resume or letter of recommendation, these are all opportunities for you to tell a very good story. So if you look at the resume first, this is the screenshot of one of my recent versions of my own resume, the first page of it. I have probably spent 3 to 4 months, 15 to 20 iterations on this resume. And I have generally seen probably several hundreds of resumes over last 8 to 10 months. And what I have seen is that two things mainly stand out in good resumes. One is the structure of the resume, and second one is the wording. So in this resume, the structure is so obvious that you can easily make out what is where. And there is not a single word in this resume that is out of place, because so much effort has been put in making this resume. And even with so much effort, nobody is going to probably spend more than 1 to 2 minutes on your resume. So resume really is like an elevator pitch. And this is because when, top departments who are trying to admit, 40, 50 or 60 students, they are probably getting 1,000 plus applicants from all over the world. So it's impossible for them to look at every single point written in the resume, but rather they treat the resume as an elevator pitch. But when you come to SOP, the statement of purpose, it is much more detailed, and it will be read very well in detail. And when you think about the SOP, it is literally the foundation of your story. It gives you the ability to completely express about how your past experiences, how your values as a person, how your goals and vision for the future, whether it's in academia or whether it's in industry, how these things make you a really, really good fit to a particular department. So if you think about that way, SOP is probably the most important essay that you will ever write in your entire life. A very, very well written SOP can be the difference between a high ranked university and a not so high ranked university when you're getting admits. And finally, when you think about LOR, LORs add extreme credibility to your whole story, whatever you are writing in your resume and SOP. And usually you think that LORs, you don't have the control over LOR. However, you can talk to your professors or managers or whoever is recommending you and politely ask them, hi professor, do you think I can give you a draft of the LOR which you may modify before submitting? And then if you ask this very nicely, they will basically tell you, yeah, please send this to my email, I'll have a look at it. But if you are not very careful here, they might get offended. They might say, hey, don't tell me what to write, I know what to write. So this kind of situation could be there. But if you nicely manage it, you basically get control over all aspects of the application. And overall, you need 3 LORs. And one big difference you have to notice in the style of writing of LOR, for example, in India versus the US, or even versus the Europe. In India, we speak very in a very straightforward manner, like there is no glorification. It's very much to the point. Whereas when people, like culturally itself, like when people speak about things, like there is a lot more heavy usage of adjectives in the US. So I'm just showing you an example here. Sridhar is a studious candidate who has been working in my lab for the last 2 years. This sounds like a nice sentence. However, this will be a very generic. This might sound very generic when somebody is reading this, especially from the US. Instead, if you write the same thing as Sridhar is by far the most talented and driven student whom I have had the pleasure to mentor, and he spearheaded several flagship projects in my lab over the course of last 2 years. This sounds like an emphatic, like this is an exceptional LOR if the whole content of the LOR is written this way. So ideally, when you're crafting the LORs for your professors, you should make sure that you are writing it in such an emphatic way. And ultimately, resume, LORs, your SOP, everything should tell the same story. They should not contradict each other. Resume is like your elevator pitch. LOR adds credibility to your story, and SOP is the foundation of your story. And in general, when you think about these documents, don't think like an applicant who has a checklist of these items to finish, like resume, LOR, SOP to submit. Instead of thinking like that, think like a performer who is trying to give your best performance in front of the admissions committee, but not in person, through these documents. So if you think from that kind of a mindset, you will be able to think of these documents as storytelling opportunities. So the bottom line is here is that think like a very good storyteller when you are crafting these documents. When I said research profile earlier, what I mean by that is publications, conferences, or patents. These have the highest value because these are tangible research outcomes. Things like international research internships or just research projects, they have value, but probably low to moderate value, unless those works are converted into some tangible outcomes, like either a strong letter of recommendation or papers that are under review, conference submission, etc. But otherwise, you should think that when you are applying to a good department, you are not competing with your classmates anymore. You're basically competing with the best of the best from all over the world. So if you just have a few research projects, it's impossible for the admissions committee to distinguish between your profile and someone else's profile. Staying ahead of the rest of the applicants can happen only if you have these tangible research outcomes. So instead of your resume looking just like, being a document having a bunch of projects that are random, ideally you should aim to have a resume where there is maybe 1 or 2 publications and conferences, because here in the left-hand side version, it can tell the admissions committee a story. Basically, in 1 or 2 sentences, it can show that you have the ability to start projects, execute them fully, arrive at results, and communicate the results really well by articulating it as a paper or in the form of a conference presentation. And this is what is exactly expected out of you as a master's candidate, master's thesis candidate, or PhD thesis candidate. So ideally, you should have a resume that is something like this on the left, or a hybrid of the one on the left and the one on the right, but not just the one on the right with a bunch of projects. The good thing is you don't necessarily have to publish for talking about a project in the resume. Like here, you can see that Raj had mentioned in his resume an article in preparation in the publication section. So you can mention about articles that are in preparation, or articles that are under review, or just submitted. All of them you can mention in the publication section. Similarly, conferences that are just been submitted to, or the one which you are awaiting the decision, whatever, like all of those presentations also you can mention in the conference presentation section of the resume, because it's well known that when you are trying to publish, it's a time-taking process. However, it will eventually get published, right? Your work will eventually get published. So in the meanwhile, whether it is in review for many months, you can mention about that work as one of your publications. GRE TOEFL, it's needed such that, GRE is not needed for many programs. Many universities have already waived off the requirement. So our advice this year is that if you are not extremely sure which programs you are applying to, it's probably better to write GRE. I think maybe 75% of the students that we know are writing GRE this year. However, many students have the clarity that these are the list of programs that they might be applying to. In such cases, you can skip the GRE altogether. So if you are planning to write it, understand that it might need maybe 1.5 to 2 months of preparation, and try to aim for a score of 320 plus, and you should ideally finish the GRE preparation by end of September or latest by sometime in October. TOEFL or IELTS, both are equally preferred. I think TOEFL is sometimes a bit more preferred in some of the US universities, as far as we understand. And if you are preparing in TOEFL, try to aim for 105 plus out of 120, and in IELTS, try to score 7.5 plus. Generally, these exams need maybe 2 to 3 weeks of preparation. I'll talk very little about how my profile was when I was applying. So I was studying at IIT Madras, and I had a 9.6 out of 10 GPA. So I was the gold medalist of my department. So this was me receiving the award from the then director, Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy. So I knew that academic wise, I had a strong edge. However, this was not enough. So I also worked a lot on my research profile. So I had a 4-month research internship. This was a DAD internship in Germany. I had a couple of conferences. One was in UK and one was in France. And I also had an international publication. So this is how my profile was, which was reasonably good. And on top of all of this, something that I did very nicely is that I had a very unique storytelling technique in my application. So I had a very compelling SOP, an extremely well-structured resume, and 4 strong letters of recommendation. I know they were strong because I wrote the drafts myself for my professors. On top of this, I had a 114 out of 120 in TOEFL and 334 out of 340 in GRE. So these were also pretty high scores. And on top of all of this, something that I did very cleverly, smartly, is that I was actually not very much focused on one area of research. I was interested in multiple different areas of researches. So I looked at what the department had to offer, I looked at what the department had to offer, and I played my biggest strengths. So for example, when I applied to MIT, I applied as a manufacturing specialist, and when I applied to CMU, I applied as a computational specialist. And eventually when I got admits, I had originally applied to 8 universities and I got admits from all of them, including MIT, CMU and Berkeley. It was a big headache to choose between these first three. However, it was a good headache to have than not having admits. Now, the vision of the long-term mentorship program is to help you in the next few months in the following two aspects. One is building a strong research profile, and second one is crafting a very good story in your application. So basically the pitch of your profile. So when I say building a strong research profile, I mean there are a few things which we can do. One is we can teach you how to communicate some of your new or relatively new results in the form of journal papers. The second thing is we can teach you how to conduct literature review, where you review like 60 to 80 papers, and then you read those papers in a particular area of research, understand what's going on in that particular science or technology, and form an opinion, and you write that in the form of a paper. So that is what's called as literature review papers, and this can also be written. And finally, we'll also teach you how to write something called as preprints, which I'll explain in a minute. So the good thing is, usually what do? You work with professors to get their letter of recommendation, and the work also generally it would be high quality because you're working with the professor. And so this is a good approach for working on projects such that you can have some publications. However, the only downside of this is that you probably won't be able to control your timeline of publishing, because that is generally controlled by the professors. They will decide when to submit a paper, etc. So ideally, you might want to control your timeline, right? Because you might want to submit your application sometime in December, which means you have to submit the paper before that. So we also recommend, in parallel to working with the professors, we also recommend you to work on single author papers where you will be the first and corresponding author. So in this slide, which will load soon, I'm trying to show a 12-week timeline that we have devised for creating for writing a very good review paper. So we start with identifying the topic. We read around a couple of dozen or papers to understand what's going on in a particular area of research, to understand the pattern. Then we start with a bullet pointed outline of the paper, including the abstract and figures. Then we write the main body of the paper in a bullet pointed outline format. Then writing the manuscript. Then we will review the paper, which will lead to rewriting it, and eventually writing a cover letter to the editor, and submitting the paper to the journal. So this whole timeline that we are looking at is like a less than 12-week, basically 3-month timeline. The timeline can also be accelerated depending on how fast you are able to manage the task. But basically, an activity, something like this, is what we are trying to do for review papers as well as for journal articles. Let me go to the next slide. So when I said preprints in the previous slides, what I meant by that is one of the biggest open access non-peer reviewed medium of publishing is arXiv. So arXiv, you can access arXiv at arXiv.org. Basically on arXiv you can publish any kind of work which has reasonably good quality with very minimal peer review. Basically it allows you to publish very fast. So you can even convert some of your past course projects which were, let's say, not too small but not too big enough to be submitted to a journal, that we can teach you how to convert into arXiv preprints in a span of less than 2 weeks. So organizing the course project into a very well structured manuscript, then following the formatting guidelines mentioned by the arXiv, creating an account, and then submitting the preprint. This preprint is basically a published article. You can mention about that in the publication section of the resume. In fact, some of the early ResNet papers in convolutional neural network in machine learning, and even some of the good papers in fluid mechanics and many other fields, were originally published as arXiv preprints, which had huge number of citations. Like some of the papers had 50,000, 70,000 citations from arXiv. So it's like a very good medium for publishing, very fast. One more thing which we are trying to do is, so this is an actual journal. I have blurred it because this paper is currently, as I speak, is under peer review. But basically, this was one of the articles that I worked with a student recently. So in the initial draft she wrote had many, the story had many issues. It needed a major revamp. Then we worked with her and we completely revamped the paper to make it into a very, very new version, which was well written and which was extraordinarily better. And currently this paper is under peer review, so fingers crossed, hopefully we'll get a very positive result. But what I want to show you here is that something like this is what we are trying to accomplish in the long-term mentorship program if both of us or all of us were to work together. The ultimate goal, the realistic goal that we expect is if you have a bunch of projects right now on your resume, we are trying to see if we can convert some of them into papers under review, papers under submission, or conferences that are accepted or submitted. We will not say that we'll be able to publish papers, because publishing is a much more longer process. Like generally when you submit a paper, by the time it gets published after maybe a couple of rounds of peer review, it might be 6 to 8 months. So we may not be able to publish, but we can get the papers into this shape such that you can mention them in the publication section. One more thing that we are trying to do is building a beautiful looking personal portfolio website. So usually, on resume and SOP, you can only read and write. You can only write things. You can't show things. On the other hand, on websites, you can show really beautiful looking things. Like, so this is a snapshot of website of my colleague, Samantha McBride. So she was at MIT. And here she shows some of the crystallization patterns that she obtained from her research on her website. So something like this you can build for yourself. And the good thing about having a portfolio website is that you can keep updating the website even after you submit your application. So when the admission committee is looking at your application a few months after you submit, let's say right after you submit, maybe after a few weeks, one of your papers got accepted in a journal, then you might want to make that as a highlight of the landing page of your website, such that you can get a competitive advantage compared to the students who do not do this. Now, please don't worry, like you don't have to know React coding or anything like that to build such websites. We can show you templates and we can show you ways in which you can create such website using Wix or GoDaddy or Squarespace.com or WordPress. There are many platforms using which you can create such websites. And as part of the long-term mentorship program, when I said crafting a great story in the application, what I mean is, having this compelling and coherent story in all the letters of recommendation, in the statement of purpose and resume. Please note that these documents ideally will take, many different iterations to get into a very good shape. One more step which you should not be ignoring is university shortlisting. So I have seen that several of my friends who had a very good academic record and research record, they shortlisted the university based on QS ranking. So they defined that some universities were hard, some were medium, or some were easy. But unfortunately, they got rejects from most of the places they applied to, because when you're mentioning that you are interested in a particular area of research in your MS SOP application or PhD SOP application, you might want to make sure that the professors who are currently in the department are actually working on that domain. So even if you have a great profile and even if the QS ranking of a particular university is not so great, you may not be taken in, because they might see that there is a misfit because your interest and what is happening in the department is not matching. So university shortlisting is a very important step, which please do not ignore. Many people have had very bad experiences in their admission process because they did not pay enough attention to university shortlisting. This is also ideally happens with a lot of brainstorming. You cannot just like that sit and Google and find the details about the university and decide where you want to apply. But the end goal here is that you start from a big list, like maybe 30-40 universities, and then down select to 10 to 12 universities that are easy, medium, and dream. That's the ultimate. This is a YouTube video published on MIT's YouTube channel last year. This was about my research. At this point, almost 270,000 people have watched this video. There is a significant recover up to 9. So we usually think of photovoltaics as a renewable energy source, but in reality, there is a significant water footprint associated with photovoltaic energy purposes. And this is fresh water. And I will not be playing this whole video, but basically what I wanted to show you here is that, so here what we did is, we were trying to clean solar panels without using water. So we built an electrostatic technology to charge and repel dust particles, which means you can recover almost 95% of the lost power output without consuming a single drop of water. So eventually this work was published in Science Advances. It's a big journal. And this video was also published on YouTube channel of MIT. And then what happened is NASA had reached out to us because they were very interested to try a different version of this technology on their lunar and Mars rovers. So basically, when they send rockets to Moon or Mars, when the rovers land, there is a lot of dust that accumulates on the solar panels of these rovers, which can be detrimental to the billion-dollar mission that they are running. So they want to try out this technology in a different version, and currently I'm in one of the scientific advisory roles in this project. And hopefully, maybe in next 5 to 6 years, this might actually be a technology that they are sending up on their rockets onto Moon or Mars. But the bottom line here is that what I was trying to say is that everybody knows that research, whether it's in industry, whether it's in masters or PhD, it's a very difficult process. Everybody knows that. However, it can also be very, very rewarding. Like when you publish your papers, when people read about your work, you don't know what kind of opportunity is going to come in your way when you are conducting such research and communicating it in a very, very nice way. So I really wanted to show you this video to inspire you to do something in research, regardless of whether it's for my MS or PhD or even in industry. And we really appreciate you for taking this step of wanting to go to grad school for for studying further and for developing your career further. So that's all about the long-term mentorship program. The one last detail is pricing. Just give me 1 second to go to the next slide. So we'll be explaining the pricing to you separately.